The temple bells rang across the crystalline spires of Gorafen's capital, their ethereal tones carrying through thin mountain air. High Priestess Zelania stood at the sacred observation platform, her ceremonial robes flowing in the wind. She closed her eyes, reaching for the divine connection that had guided her people for 30 generations. Nothing. The silence in her mind wasn't new. It had been growing for months now, a hollow space where the gods' whispers should have been. She opened her eyes, watching pilgrims gather below for evening prayers. They trusted her. They believed she could hear the divine voices, feel their presence, know their will. She felt like a fraud. "Your Holiness." A temple servant approached, bowing low. "The human diplomat has arrived early. He awaits you in the consultation chamber." Zelania's chest tightened. She'd heard about this human, Roland Fletcher, the Federation's most notoriously secular representative, a man who believed in nothing beyond what he could touch and measure. The Council had insisted on this meeting, hoping to strengthen ties with the human alliance. Perfect timing, she thought bitterly. The consultation chamber felt smaller than usual. Roland Fletcher stood examining a wall tapestry depicting the first revelation, his hands clasped behind his back. He was tall by human standards, with dark hair graying at the temples and sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything they touched. "Mr. Fletcher." Zelania kept her voice steady, formal. "Welcome to the Temple of Eternal Light." He turned, offering a slight bow that was technically correct but somehow felt perfunctory. "High Priestess, thank you for receiving me." She gestured to the cushions arranged for consultation. He sat with obvious discomfort, his human physiology not built for their traditional seating. She suppressed a flicker of sympathy. "The Council believes our peoples can benefit from closer cooperation," she began. "Yes." His tone was neutral, professional. "Though I'll admit, religious institutions aren't typically my area of expertise. I prefer dealing with elected governments." The words landed like stones in still water. Zelania felt heat rise in her chest. "The gods chose me to lead. Our people accept their wisdom. Do they choose you, or do you claim they choose you?" His eyes met hers directly. "Forgive me, but I've visited 47 worlds with 47 different pantheons, all equally certain, all equally unprovable." "You're very direct, Mr. Fletcher. I find it saves time." He shifted on the cushion. "But I'm not here to debate theology. The Federation respects your sovereignty. My job is to establish trade protocols and cultural exchange programs." Something about his bluntness cracked through her careful composure. "You don't believe in anything?" He paused, considering. "I believe in what people do, not what they claim divine authority tells them to do. I believe in compassion, justice, progress. But I don't need a god to tell me those things matter." The words should have angered her. Instead, they resonated in the hollow space inside her chest. Over the next 3 weeks, Roland Fletcher became an unexpected constant in her life. The Council had assigned him quarters in the temple complex while negotiations proceeded. She would find him in the gardens, reading reports. In the library, examining historical texts with genuine curiosity. In the meditation courtyard, simply sitting in silence. "Don't you have anything else to do?" she asked one morning, finding him there again. "Negotiations are slow." He looked up at the 3 moons visible in the dawn sky. "Your world is beautiful. Seems wasteful not to appreciate it." She sat on the bench across from him, abandoning pretense of propriety. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? A cold cynic?" "Something like that." He smiled slightly. "I don't believe in gods, High Priestess. That doesn't mean I don't believe in wonder." The conversation opened a door she hadn't known she'd needed. Over shared meals, awkward at first but gradually comfortable, they talked. He told her about Earth, about humanity's messy history of faith and doubt. She found herself confessing things she'd never said aloud. "I don't hear them anymore," she admitted one evening. They sat in her private garden, stars emerging overhead. "The gods. I haven't heard their voices in 4 months." She waited for judgment. Instead, Roland's expression softened with something like understanding. "Does that frighten you?" "Terrifies me. My entire life, my purpose, my identity, all built on that connection." Her hands trembled. "What if it was never real? What if I've been lying to myself, to everyone?" "Or," he said quietly, "what if the connection was real for you, and losing it is part of your journey? What if the question isn't whether the gods exist, but what you do now?" The words shouldn't have comforted her, but they did. The crisis came during the Festival of Ascension. The temple overflowed with pilgrims seeking the high priestess's blessing. Zelania stood before thousands, her voice carrying the traditional invocations. Inside, the silence screamed. Then a child approached, barely 6 seasons old. "High priestess, my father is dying. Please ask the gods to heal him." Zelania's mouth went dry. The crowd hushed, waiting. She saw Roland at the edge of the gathering, his expression concerned. She knelt, meeting the child's eyes. "Tell me about your father. He's kind. He makes me laugh. He works so hard." Tears spilled down small cheeks. "I don't want him to go." Zelania felt something shift inside her. Not the divine voice she'd known. Something different, more grounded, more real. "I cannot promise you miracles," she said softly, "but I can promise you're not alone. What's your father's name?" "Kelvin. He's at the healing ward." "Then let's go see him together." She stood, ignoring the shocked murmurs. A high priestess didn't leave the temple during sacred festivals. She didn't abandon ceremony for individual concerns. She didn't care. Roland fell into step beside her as she walked through the streets, the child's hand in hers. "This will cause problems," he murmured. "Probably. Good." They found Kelvin in a crowded ward, suffering from mountain fever. The healers were doing their best, but resources were stretched thin. Zelania spent the evening there, not praying but helping, fetching water, cooling fevered foreheads, listening to frightened families. Roland worked beside her, his diplomatic training forgotten in practical compassion. When dawn came, Kelvin's fever had broken. Not through divine intervention, but through medicine and care and the healer's skill. The child's joy was transcendent anyway. Walking back to the temple, exhausted and rumpled, Zelania felt something she hadn't in months. Peace. "You're smiling," Roland observed. "I helped someone, really helped them. Not through prayer or blessing, but through being present, through doing what was needed." She looked at him. "Is that enough? Can that be enough?" "I think," he said carefully, "it's everything." The council summoned her 2 days later. She stood before them, still wearing yesterday's robes, and faced their fury. "You abandoned the sacred festival. You degraded your office. You showed weakness before the people." Elder Counselor Pravith, the eldest, fixed her with stern eyes. "What do you have to say for yourself, High Priestess?" Zelania straightened. "I say that we've become so focused on ceremony that we've forgotten compassion, so invested in divine authority that we've abandoned human connection." She used Roland's word deliberately. "I say that if our faith can't handle questions, it's not worth having. And I say that I'm tired of pretending." The silence was absolute. "You admit you don't hear the gods?" Pravith's voice was dangerous. "I admit I've been struggling. I admit I have doubts. I admit I'm trying to figure out what faith means when it doesn't come with certainty." She met their eyes. "And I'm not resigning. If you want me gone, you'll have to remove me." They couldn't. Not without causing a schism. The people loved her too much. The compromise was brutal. She could remain High Priestess, but only after a period of spiritual renewal. 6 months of seclusion, meditation, and prayer to restore her connection to the divine. She agreed. She had no choice. They sent her to the mountain monastery, a remote facility carved into stone above the cloud line. Only one person was allowed to accompany her. Roland volunteered. "You can't," she protested. "Your work, your negotiations, are less important than making sure you're not alone." His expression was stubborn. "Besides, I've always wanted to see the mountains." The monastery was stark, cold, beautiful in its severity. The other priests left them mostly alone, uncertain how to handle the unorthodox arrangement. The first month was hardest. Zelania sat in meditation cells, trying to recapture what she'd lost. Roland respected her space, but he was there, reading in the library, walking the mountain paths, making tea in the evenings. Slowly, they talked more. About faith and doubt, about meaning and purpose, about what made life worth living when you couldn't be certain of anything. "What if I never hear them again?" she asked one night, snow falling outside the window. "Then you figure out who you are without them." Roland set down his cup. "You're still the person who helped that child, who cared for the sick, who stood up to the council. The gods didn't make you do those things. You did. In your world, without gods, how do you know what's right?" He considered. "We argue, we try things, we make mistakes and learn from them. We look at the results of our actions and adjust. It's messy and uncertain, and sometimes we get it terribly wrong." He smiled slightly. But we do it together. We don't need perfect divine clarity to show basic human decency. Human, she echoed. But I'm not human. The principle translates. His eyes held hers. You don't need a God's voice to tell you that child mattered. You already knew. The revelation came not in thunderous divine proclamation, but in quiet accumulation. Week by week, conversation by conversation, Zelania felt herself reconstructing, not as the vessel for divine will she'd been trained to be, but as something more terrifying and real. A person, with her own judgment, her own capacity for compassion, her own authority derived not from the gods, but from her choices. 3 months in, Roland fell ill. Mountain sickness, the monastery healer said, his human physiology struggling with the altitude. Zelania sat by his bed for 3 days, monitoring his fever, ensuring he drank enough water, reading to him when he was conscious. The panic she felt was different from the fear of losing divine connection. This was sharper, more immediate, more personal. When his fever broke, she was holding his hand. That was unpleasant, he croaked. You're an idiot. Relief made her voice harsh. You should never have come here. This altitude could have killed you, but it didn't. That's not the point, isn't it? He squeezed her hand weakly. I made a choice. It had risks. I'd make it again. She understood then, the feeling she'd been dancing around for months. The reason his opinion mattered more than the council's. The reason his presence felt like coming home. Roland, I know. His eyes were steady. I've known for a while. But you needed to figure out who you were first. And have I? Have you? She thought about the person she'd been. The frightened priestess clinging to divine certainty. Then, the person she was becoming. Still uncertain, but no longer terrified of doubt. Still seeking meaning, but finding it in action rather than revelation. I think, she said slowly, I'm someone who doesn't need the gods to tell me you matter. I think I'm someone who can choose for herself what she believes in. And what do you believe in? Compassion, justice, progress. She echoed his words from months ago. And you. He pulled her closer. That's a start. The 6 months ended. They returned to the capital together, and Zelania knew there would be consequences. A high priestess taking a human partner, especially an atheist one, would shock the faithful. She didn't care. The council convened immediately. Elder Pravith studied her with ancient eyes. Have you restored your connection to the divine, High Priestess? Zelania stood tall, Roland beside her. I have found something more valuable. I've learned that faith doesn't require certainty, that doing good doesn't require divine instruction, that love and compassion and justice are valuable in themselves, not because gods command them. That sounds like heresy. That sounds like honesty. She met their stares. I'm done pretending, done claiming divine authority for my own judgments. If you want a high priestess who pretends to speak for the gods, find someone else. If you want someone who will serve the people with genuine compassion, I'm here. With him? Pravith gestured at Roland. A non-believer? With him. With anyone who shares the goal of making life better for our people. Believer or not. She took Roland's hand openly. I choose both, my service and my heart. If the gods disapprove, they haven't bothered to tell me. The room erupted. Half the council demanded her removal. The other half pointed out the impossibility. She was too beloved. Removing her would tear the temple apart. The compromise took weeks to forge. She could remain high priestess, but the role would change. Less divine oracle, more ethical leader and community advocate. The temple would evolve, slowly, into something new. Something that valued questions as much as answers. It wasn't perfect. Many faithful left, seeking certainty elsewhere. But many stayed, hungry for a faith that could accommodate doubt. Roland's diplomatic mission concluded, but he requested reassignment to Gorafen. The Federation agreed, bemused. A year later, they stood again in the private garden where she'd first confessed her fears. The 3 moons were full, bathing everything in silver light. Any regrets? Roland asked. Zelania considered. She'd lost the divine certainty that had defined her life. She'd gained something she valued more. Agency. Choice. Love. None, she said. You taught me that faith and certainty aren't the same thing, that you can believe in what matters without needing a god to validate it. You taught me, he countered, that atheism doesn't mean nihilism, that rejecting divine authority doesn't mean rejecting meaning. That someone can lose their religion and find something better. What did I find? Yourself. He pulled her close. And me, but mostly yourself. She laughed, the sound carrying across the garden. The temple bells rang in the distance, their tone unchanged. But what they meant to her had transformed entirely. They were no longer the voice of distant gods demanding obedience. They were her people, calling her to service. And she answered not because she had to, but because she chose to. That made all the difference. If you have enjoyed the story, tell YouTube to send you more stories like this by subscribing to this channel, liking the video, and leaving a comment.